Welcome to the deep dive. We've got some fascinating material to dig into today, all about using Buddhist teachings to calm, overactive minds. Specifically, how to quiet that overthinking storm.
Right.
We've got a couple articles here, one is called 6 Buddhist Teachings to Stop Overthinking and Find Inner Peace. And then there's The Path to Inner Peace, Breaking Free from Overthinking Through Buddhist Wisdom.
Okay, great.
Really excited to explore these with you. And I think even if we're, not Buddhists ourselves, I think there's a lot
Definitely.
that we can all use here, a little more peace in our lives.
Right. Use that.
So, and just skimming through these, it seems like the sources are saying that these principles, these Buddhist principles, there's a real practical, almost universal appeal to them when it comes to finding that inner calm.
I think that's right.
Yeah. Some of the ideas that really jumped out at me were even just simple things like, how our breath can kind of be like an anchor in the present moment, or even, thinking about approaching our thoughts like we'd approach decluttering a messy room.
Yes, I love that.
Yeah, I thought that was a good one.
I think that's a great observation, and it speaks to one of the core tenets of Buddhism, which is this concept of impermanence.
Okay.
The text really emphasizes that everything is in constant flux.
Okay.
Our thoughts, our emotions, situations.
Yeah.
And it's trying to cling to these things as if they were permanent truths. That really leads to that feeling of being overwhelmed.
Right.
Stuck in that overthinking storm, as you called it.
So how does this idea, I'm intrigued, how does this idea of impermanence, how does that actually help us calm down?
Well, you can think of it like trying to hold on to a wave in the ocean.
Right.
You can't, it's constantly moving and changing. And Buddhism teaches us to recognize that impermanent nature of thoughts and emotions.
Okay.
Which can help us ride the waves, so to speak, of our mental experience instead of being swept away by them.
Okay, so it's kind of like instead of getting tangled up in every thought or feeling that comes up, we can learn to kind of just observe them come and go.
Precisely. And that's where mindfulness comes in.
Okay.
Mindfulness is about cultivating that non-judgmental awareness of the present moment. So instead of dwelling on past regrets or anxiously anticipating the future, we practice bringing our attention back to right now.
I'm starting to see how these concepts fit together.
Yeah.
But I've got to say, mindfulness, it's one of those buzzwords that gets thrown around so much.
Yeah, no.
What does that actually look like in practice?
Yeah, I hear you, but it's really simpler than you might think.
Okay.
One of the most fundamental techniques, and one that these sources highlight, is using the breath as an anchor. The breath is always present, always accessible.
Right.
And by focusing on that sensation of each inhale and exhale, we can gently guide our attention back to the present moment.
Okay.
Whenever we find ourselves drifting into thoughts about the past or the future.
It's like a built-in reset button,
Exactly.
for our minds. And the article even, one of the sources even gives this really simple instruction for it. It says, deep breath in, hold, slow exhale, and you're back in the NW.
Nice.
I love how practical that is. But what about the thoughts themselves? Buddhism seems to have kind of a unique perspective on those too, right?
Absolutely. The teachings really emphasize that thoughts are not facts.
Okay.
They're simply mental events, interpretations shaped by our past experiences, our fears, our desires. And one of the sources uses this vivid analogy. They say thoughts are like leaves floating on a river.
Okay.
You don't need to grab onto every single leaf that drifts by.
Right.
You just watch them come and go.
So instead of getting into this tug of war with every thought that pops into my head, I can learn to observe them with more detachment.
Exactly. And this practice of non-attachment is a really powerful tool for calming that overthinking storm.
Okay.
Now, it's important to note that non-attachment isn't indifference.
Right.
It's about recognizing that thoughts have a beginning, a middle, and an end. They arise, they exist for a while, and then they pass away.
Okay.
And by not clinging to them, we diminish their power over us.
This is really giving me a whole new way to think about my thoughts. It's almost like I'm learning a new language for understanding my inner world,
I love that.
But let's be honest, this whole letting go thing is easier said than done.
Sure.
As humans, we crave control, especially when it comes to things like,
I agree.
our thoughts and emotions.
Absolutely.
And it seems like, from what I'm reading here, that desire for control is often what fuels the overthinking storm in the first place.
Yeah, I think that's right.
So it's about learning to surrender.
I think so.
To accept what is, rather than constantly resisting it.
Yes.
So instead of trying to micromanage every aspect of my life. It's about learning to let go of the things I can't control.
Yes, I think it's a radical idea, but I think it's an important one.
It is. And the Source even offers a question, like a helpful question to ask ourselves in those moments. It says, is this within my control? And if it is, take action. If it's not,
let it go.
Practice letting go. I love that. It's such a simple question, but it's so powerful.
It is.
And it brings up another aspect of this whole overthinking thing that I wanted to ask you about, which is that self-judgment piece, that inner critic that's constantly replaying our mistakes and beating us up about them.
Right.
It seems like that's a major contributor to the overthinking storm.
For sure. And Buddhism offers a really potent antidote for that.
Okay.
Self-compassion.
So instead of being so harsh on ourselves, we should treat ourselves with the same kindness that we would give to a friend.
Precisely. And one of the sources says it so beautifully. They say, you, as much as anybody, deserve your love and affection.
That's so good.
Isn't that great?
I love that. It's so easy to forget that in the midst of all the,
all the noise.
All the chatter, yeah. And speaking of mental chatter, one of the sources also talked about the importance of simplicity as a key to finding inner peace.
Right.
And it just struck me, in today's world, we're just bombarded with
information overload.
So many choices and distractions, and it all seems to fuel these overthinking tendencies.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial point.
Yeah.
This constant influx of information and stimulation can be really overwhelming for our minds. And it makes it really difficult to find any sense of peace.
Right.
And so that's where this Buddhist principle of simplicity comes in. It's about recognizing that less can be more, both internally and externally.
So it's kind of like decluttering our minds the same way we might declutter our homes, getting rid of all the unnecessary mental junk.
Yes.
But how do we even begin to do that?
Well, the sources suggest a few practical steps.
Okay.
One is to become more mindful of the thoughts we're feeding our minds. Just like we're careful about what we put into our bodies, we can choose to be more discerning about the information that we consume. And we can ask ourselves, is this thought helpful? Does it serve me? And if not, gently let it go, creating space for more peaceful and supportive thoughts.
It's like giving ourselves permission to just hit the delete button on all those unhelpful thoughts.
Exactly.
I love that. And this idea of creating a more peaceful internal environment leads perfectly into the next thing I wanted to unpack, which is gratitude.
Okay, yeah.
It's a concept I've always been interested in. And it seems like the Buddhist perspective adds another layer of depth to it.
Definitely.
What's their take on gratitude?
Well, Buddhism sees gratitude as a really powerful antidote to that negativity bias that often fuels overthinking.
Right.
So while overthinking tends to focus on what's missing in our lives, gratitude invites us to appreciate what's already present.
So it's about shifting our attention from lack to abundance.
Exactly. And the source even offers a practical tip. They say, try listing 3 things you're grateful for each day.
Yeah.
This very simple act can really help rewire our brains for positivity.
Whoa.
Making us less susceptible to getting caught in those negative thought spirals.
I love that.
Yeah.
This all makes so much sense. But I have to admit, one concept that I still really struggle with is this whole idea of letting go of attachment to outcomes.
Yeah.
It seems like so much of our overthinking stems from that fear of failure, that need to control how things turn out.
Yes.
How does Buddhism address that?
It's definitely one of the more challenging teachings to put into practice.
Yeah.
But Buddhist teachings emphasize that clinging to specific outcomes is a major source of suffering.
Right.
If we hold on too tightly to the idea of how things should be, we set ourselves up for disappointment because, well, life rarely goes exactly according to plan, right?
Like we're trying to micromanage the universe. And it's just exhausting.
It is.
So it's about doing our best, but accepting whatever outcome arises.
Yes.
Yeah.
It sounds incredibly difficult, but it can also be incredibly freeing.
It can. And one of the sources suggests kind of a helpful mindset shift. Okay. Instead of thinking, I must succeed, try thinking, I'll do my best and accept what comes.
That's a great reframe.
I know. It's so simple, but that shift in perspective, it's so powerful.
It is.
It kind of takes the pressure off, and allows us to approach life with more ease and openness.
Exactly. And it reminds us that we're not helpless victims of our thoughts or circumstances.
Right.
We have agency, and we can actively choose to cultivate a more peaceful way of being.
This is all so insightful. I feel like we've just scratched the surface of these teachings.
I know.
But I'm already starting to see how they can be applied in my own life.
Yeah.
You know, we've talked about impermanence, mindfulness, the breath, non-attachment, self-compassion, simplicity, gratitude. It's just amazing to me how all these ideas connect to create this framework for calming that overthinking storm.
It's remarkable, isn't it?
It is.
And there's still so much more to explore.
I know.
Yeah.
And explore we shall. But I think for now, this is a perfect place to pause. We've covered a lot of ground.
We have.
And I think it's important to give our listeners time to kind of absorb all of these incredible ideas.
Definitely.
So when we come back in part 2, we'll delve into some more specific techniques and practices that can help put these teachings into action.
Sounds good. I'm looking forward to that.
Me too. And in the meantime, I'd invite our listeners to reflect on this question. If peace is already within us, as these teachings suggest, what's one small step you can take today to quiet the overthinking storm in your own mind?
That's a great question to ponder.
Yeah. Until next time.
See you then.
Welcome back to our deep dive into calming that, the overthinking storm using Buddhist wisdom. So last time we unpacked some really incredible concepts like impermanence, mindfulness, self-compassion, gratitude. But now I'm kind of ready to get into the practical stuff.
Yeah.
What are some specific techniques that we can actually use to put these teachings into action?
I love that. That's a great question.
Yeah.
And luckily, the sources you provided have some really helpful suggestions.
Okay.
And one that really caught my eye is this idea of mental decluttering.
Okay.
It's such a powerful metaphor for how we can create more peace and space in our minds.
I love that analogy.
Yeah.
But how do we actually do that? It is like throwing out old clothes. Are there specific thoughts we should target?
It's less about targeting specific thoughts and more about kind of shifting our relationship to them.
Okay.
The source suggests we pay attention to the thoughts that arise and ask ourselves, is this thought helpful? Is it serving me in this moment?
So instead of getting caught up in every thought that pops up, we can learn to pause and make a conscious choice about whether to engage with it or to just let it go.
Exactly. And remember that analogy of the leaves floating down a river? We don't need to jump in and try to catch every single one. We can simply observe them and let them pass without getting swept away. And that's where the practice of non-attachment comes in.
This all ties back beautifully to what we were talking about before, about not clinging to our thoughts as if they're, absolute truths.
Exactly.
Let's get even more practical.
Okay.
One of the sources talked about reducing external noise as a way to kind of support this mental decluttering. What do they mean by that?
They're talking about that constant barrage of information and stimulation that we face in the modern world. Social media, news, emails, notifications.
It's constant.
It's no wonder our minds feel like they're constantly racing.
Yeah, it's so true.
Right. And reducing this external noise can create more space for inner stillness.
I feel like I'm constantly bombarded with information, and it's exhausting.
Yeah.
It really is.
It's not just the quantity of information, though. It's also the quality.
Right.
Are we feeding our minds with content that kind of uplifts and inspires us? Or are we consuming things that leave us feeling drained and anxious?
That's such an important question.
It is.
It's like we need to be mindful of what we're feeding our minds, just as we try to be mindful of what we eat.
Exactly. Remember that Buddhist principle of wise companionship? This applies not just to the people we surround ourselves with, but also to the information and media we consume.
Okay.
We can choose to engage with content that really nourishes our minds, just as we choose to eat foods that nourish our bodies.
So it's about creating like a mental diet.
A mental diet.
Yeah, I love that.
That supports our well-being.
Right. And just as a healthy diet can lead to physical health.
Right.
A healthy mental diet can lead to greater mental and emotional well-being.
Absolutely.
This makes me think about another concept we talked about, simplicity.
Yeah.
Choosing to engage with less but higher quality information seems like a great way to simplify our mental lives.
Absolutely. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
Simplicity is such a powerful tool for calming that overthinking mind.
Right.
And it can be applied in so many ways.
Right.
We can simplify our schedules, declutter our homes, set boundaries with technology, choose experiences over possessions. All of these choices can create more space for peace and clarity.
Okay, I'm getting really excited about all these practical things we can do. But one concept I still find a bit challenging is that whole letting go of attachment to outcomes thing.
Yeah.
How can we actually apply this in our daily lives?
It's certainly not easy. But remember, overthinking often stems from that fear of failure.
Right.
A need to control how things turn out.
Yeah.
We get caught up in all the what-ifs and should-haves, and our minds go into overdrive.
Right.
Letting go of attachment to outcomes is about recognizing that we can't control everything.
Okay.
But we can control how we respond to what happens.
So instead of clinging to specific results, it's about focusing on the process and doing our best without getting hung up on the outcome.
Exactly. And this doesn't mean we have to give up on our goals or ambitions. Yeah. It's about approaching them with a sense of acceptance, knowing that we can't control everything.
Okay.
But we can control our effort and our attitude.
That shift in perspective is so powerful.
It is.
It takes the pressure off and allows us to focus on what we can actually control.
Yes.
And speaking of powerful tools for managing our minds, what about meditation? How does that fit into all of this?
Oh, meditation is a cornerstone of Buddhist practice.
Okay.
And for good reason. It's a direct way to train our minds to be present, to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment.
Okay.
And to cultivate that inner stillness.
It sounds like a mental workout.
It is.
But I have to admit, I've struggled with meditation in the past. I always feel like I'm doing it wrong.
I think that's a common experience.
Yeah.
It's important to remember that meditation isn't about emptying the mind of all thoughts.
Right.
It's about learning to observe those thoughts without getting carried away by them.
So it's more about cultivating awareness and acceptance than achieving some kind of perfect state of stillness?
I think so, and that might make you feel a lot better.
It does.
Yeah.
But where do we even start? Are there specific techniques that we can try?
There are many different types of meditation, each with its own unique focus.
Okay.
Some popular methods include mindfulness meditation, loving-kindness meditation, walking meditation.
Okay.
The key is to find a technique that really resonates with you and start with short sessions.
Okay.
Gradually increasing the duration as you feel more comfortable.
So it's about finding what works best for you and being patient with the process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Meditation is a practice, not a performance.
Right.
And the more we practice, the more we'll experience the benefits. A calmer mind, greater emotional resilience, and a deeper sense of inner peace.
I'm starting to see how all of these pieces fit together. The mental decluttering, the mindfulness, the meditation, letting go of attachment. It's like they're all working together to create a more peaceful internal environment.
You got it. And, while cultivating inner peace is an individual journey, the sources we're exploring also highlight the importance of our external environment as well.
Ah, so it's not just about what's going on inside our heads.
Right.
The world around us plays a role too.
Absolutely. Remember the Buddha's teaching on wise companionship. Choosing to surround ourselves with positive influences, supportive people, peaceful environments, inspiring media can make a world of difference in our ability to cultivate inner peace.
So we're not just focusing on our inner world, but also being mindful of those external factors that influence our well-being.
That's right.
Okay.
It's a holistic approach to creating a life that supports peace and tranquility. And sometimes that means making difficult choices,
Yeah.
setting boundaries in relationships, simplifying our schedules, even changing our living or work environments.
It's about consciously creating a life that aligns with our values and aspirations, both internally and externally.
I agree.
Wow, we've covered so much ground
We have.
in this part of our deep dive.
I know.
It's clear that these Buddhist teachings offer just a wealth of practical wisdom for navigating
Absolutely.
the challenges of modern life
Yes.
and finding greater peace within ourselves.
I couldn't agree more. And I think it's time for another pause.
Okay.
We'll be back soon for the final part of our deep dive, where we'll continue exploring these powerful ideas and how we can apply them to create a more peaceful and fulfilling life.
Welcome back to the deep dive. In the last part, we talked about all sorts of practical things like that mental decluttering and creating a supportive external environment. But there's one concept we touched on that I'd love to kind of circle back to.
Okay.
Which is gratitude.
Yeah, gratitude.
The sources you sent over really highlight how gratitude can be a real game changer when it comes to, managing that overthinking. What makes the Buddhist perspective on gratitude unique? I mean, it's a concept that gets talked about a lot in self-help and psychology too.
You're right, it does. But what I find really interesting is how Buddhism connects gratitude directly to the concept of non-attachment, which we explored a little earlier. When we cultivate gratitude for what we already have, we naturally loosen the grip of desire for things we lack.
So it's not about pretending like everything's perfect or denying challenges, but it's about consciously choosing to appreciate the good amidst the difficult.
Exactly. And this practice can be incredibly powerful in breaking those cycles of negative thinking and worry that just fuel that overthinking storm.
Yeah, I can see that. If we're constantly fixated on what's going wrong or what we're missing, it's so easy to spiral into anxiety.
It is.
But gratitude really invites us to shift our focus, to appreciate the abundance that's already present in our lives.
Exactly. It's about training our minds to see the glass half full, so to speak.
Right.
And the beautiful thing is, gratitude is a skill that can be developed. One of the sources even suggests a really simple practice. Each day, take a few moments to write down 3 things that you're grateful for.
I love that.
Yeah.
It seems so simple, but I can imagine how that could have a really profound impact over time. It's kind of like building a muscle.
It is.
Of appreciation.
It is. And like any muscle, the more we use it, the stronger it gets.
Right.
This practice can really help to rewire our brains, making us less prone to that negativity bias and more likely to notice and appreciate the good things in life.
This makes me think about, another concept we've been talking about, letting go of attachment to outcomes.
Right.
It seems like gratitude could play a role there as well.
Absolutely, you're spot on. When we're attached to specific outcomes, we're essentially saying, I'll only be happy if things go my way. But life rarely unfolds exactly according to plan, does it?
Right. Never.
This sets us up for disappointment and fuels those what-if worries.
It's like we're trying to, micromanage the universe. And it's exhausting.
It is.
Gratitude helps us loosen that grip. It allows us to find joy in the journey itself, rather than making our happiness dependent on reaching some specific destination.
I think that's right. There's even this quote from the source that I love. It says, "The mind becomes clear, the heart becomes light, and we step into a life of true freedom."
Oh.
It seems like gratitude is an essential part of that freedom.
Yeah, it really is. By releasing those attachments and cultivating a deep sense of appreciation for what is, we create that space for peace and joy to emerge. And that's really what this whole journey is about, isn't it?
It is. It's been so fascinating to explore all this with you.
Yeah, me too.
We've covered so much ground, from understanding the nature of our thoughts to exploring practices like mindfulness and meditation, gratitude. And what's so beautiful is that these teachings, they're accessible to anyone.
I think that's what makes them so powerful.
It does.
They offer this path to freedom from the overthinking storm.
Yes.
A path that's available to all of us.
Well said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final question to ponder. If peace is already within you, what one small step can you take today to quiet the overthinking storm and invite more gratitude into your life?
That's a beautiful question to reflect on. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the wisdom of Buddhist teachings. May you find peace and clarity amidst the complexities of life.